What's up guys, it's Amin here. Today I'm going to compare 3 LED lights and figure out which one is the best 4-foot LED tube you can get for $300. The reason I'm setting the 300 number is because that is how much I'm willing to spend for a single LED light tube at this point. Actually, the Digitalfoto Chameleon on top and the Nanlite Pavotube 4-foot all come in right around $300 before tax. Both of those are actually RGB W tubes that has a full RGB mode as well as a white bicolor mode. And the Quasar science at the bottom is a simple bicolor light that retails for $200. So let's get it started. To start, I actually don't want to make this a super technical video because there's already plenty of detailed reviews on each of those lights. But rather, I want to talk about the actual experiences of me using these lights and the small differences that are not on the paper that end up making a big difference in using the light and which one I end up keeping. Let me first start with the Quasar Science Crossfade because I actually did not start out looking for a RGB W tube. I just like the look of what YouTubers like Dave2D had. So I just wanted a long LED tube to use in the background of the videos from my investing channel. So at first I went to this Quasar Science because everybody in the film industry has heard of them. I actually got these for $150 in the local rental house, and these are in good conditions and they're built to last. These are such staples in the industry and they can go from as low as 2000 Kelvin to up to 6000. However, my frustration starts from there. First of all, look at how short the cable it comes with. Literally, when I plug it into a standard height wall outlet, the bottom of the light doesn't even touch the ground. Yes, I do know that they fit in just fine in replacing the keynote flows in the standard film industry workflow, but honestly, if you're an independent creator buying a light for $100 or $200, it should come with a usable cable right off the bat. I wouldn't even be able to just plug it in and start filming if I don't have this extension cord. It reaches nowhere. So you have to build in the cost of an extension cord. Let's just say 10 bucks, right? But here's where the second problem comes in. When you plug them in, there's no way to dim them. They have a lot of output and it's just way too powerful for most indoor use cases. The rental house that sold me this told me I can just get a $10 dimmer from Home Depot down the street. But here's what happens. So the Quasar Crossfade comes with these 3-prong USA plugs. And turns out pretty much all the cheap dimmers you can find only comes with 2 prongs. This one from Home Depot actually cost me $13. I actually found it out after I got home. And luckily my mom has one of these universal to 2-prong adapters. If you don't have the adapter, you have to end up purchasing that separately. So this janky, flimsy thing is what I end up having to go into the wall for a working dimmable Quasar Crossfade. So everything should work now, right? I just turn on the dimmer. Oh, it came on. Let's try dimming it. And sometimes it works very nicely, just like that. I actually love how it looks dimmed down, especially in the darker room. And actually, I would love to just have these as a lamp and decor sitting in my room when I'm not using them to film. But other times, this dimmer just gives you very inconsistent results. Sometimes I would dim it to half and then start flashing and cannot stay at a consistent, exactly, and just shuts off. 5 seconds later, dim it halfway, flashes off. See? But when it works very nicely and can dim the light down to a perfect level, perfect for being a lamp in a dark room. What I found out in my research is that in order to have a smooth and consistent dimming experience, you actually need a very expensive high-end dimmer that easily can run you almost double the cost of this light. I actually went through 4 other dimmers, including the router fan speed controller that was suggested by a blog to work with the Quasar lights. It did end up providing a very smooth experience, no flickering, no flashing on and off, but it actually was only able to dim the light down to around 50%, even at the lowest level. And the $13 Home Depot dimmer, when it works, it can dim to much lower than that. The moral of the story: even though the Quasar produces a very nice light, you have to count in the extension cord, the adapter, and a dimmer. That could be a $30 total add-on if you just use a Home Depot dimmer like I do, that works half the time and it's very finicky. Or it could be a $130 add-on if you want to use the truly professional dimmer. With so many frustrations and the price creeping up higher than I expected, I had to look into other alternatives. And for $300 before tax, here comes the Nanlite Pavotube 30C. On paper, it's just a much more advanced and feature-rich light than the Quasar. It has DMX in and out on one side, with the DC port for powering and charging the light. The included power cable is definitely long enough and doesn't require you to have an extension cord most of the time. On the other side, it has two multi-function knobs that helps you control everything about the light. On the back of the light, they pretty much have the entire manual printed and listed every single option you can go through in the menus. It is also built better than the Quasar, having almost like a weatherproof design. The hard shell plastic tube actually wraps around the entire light, and the power switch is actually sealed. Oh, by the way, the Quasar doesn't even have a power switch. If you don't have a dimmer, the only way to switch off the Quasar is to unplug it. For $300, it's better than the Quasar in every way, right? Well, not really. For my use case, I actually see myself using the bicolor mode more than the RGB mode. So the quality of the bicolor mode is very important to me. I would say that this light is almost perfect in every other way, but here's one thing that really bothers me about the Pavotube. That is so poorly diffused that you can see every single individual LEDs in the tube. I mean, what the f for a $300 light that's built and designed so well? This is such a rookie mistake, right? Now, when I turn the intensity up, you might not see it on camera, but I can still visibly very much see it with my eyes. And if I just lower my exposure enough, even at high output of this light, you can still see it. As I said, I really wanted to use this light as a lamp and decor in my room when I'm not using it for filming, and it really annoys the out of me when I just can look over and see the individual LEDs in this light. I literally feel like I'm looking into those cheap $10 LED strips that are put into a tube that's barely diffused with one sheet of wax paper. For $300, this is honestly a deal breaker to me. The Quasar simply just looks way better when it's just sitting in a room and you're looking into the light. So I really wish more reviewers talk about this because it's the same story in the RGB mode. As long as you're not blasting it into a camera, just by dimming it down a little bit, add 100% brightness though. Most color looks just fine, except the red color. You can still see the individual LEDs. And of course, besides the regular bicolor and RGB mode, the Nanlite also includes some cool effects, right? Like the cop car, well, you can still see the LED problem in red color that we talked about. And candle mode, that's flash, like kind of pulsing the light. Flash timer. SOS mode, I think I can change the color. This is storm, okay. Storm is basically I have to hit the enter button to activate it. And that's when I ordered the Digitalfoto Chameleon as my last hope. I basically expected the worst build quality version of the Nanlite, but hopefully it doesn't have the diffusion problem. And basically, that is what I got. The Chameleon also comes with pretty much exactly the same power brick, pretty much identical plastic mount that lets you mount on top of any light stand, as well as two metal screw-on wires that lets you mount the light at the end, just like the Pavotubes. On one end, there's two dials that let you control pretty much everything about the light. DMX in, DMX out seems like through USB. I actually prefer the dials on the Chameleon because on the Nanlite, the dial is very smooth and with one flick, you can go from 0 to 100%. And it's it is harder to do finer adjustments. Unlike this one, I actually have steps. Can you hear it? Basically, every single step or clicks you heard is just changing 1% of the value, so it lets you control very precisely about the light pretty easily. It also has an LCD screen with few buttons in the Nanlite, and I will say the menus are a little bit harder to navigate than the Nanlite. It also has some other quirks. For example, when I want to turn the light off, after I press the power button. You see? You actually have to wait 5, 6, 7 seconds before the light actually comes on. And also when I'm trying to change from red to the magenta right next to it, it actually flicks through a purple color. Did you see that? And then it becomes smooth. Weird, right? Stop on the dial. So I'm going from 2800 straight to 9900 Kelvin. Also, I would have preferred to have a slightly warmer temperature beyond 2800, probably 2400 or even the 2000 like the Quasars has, over having 9900 in the extreme blue color. I just don't see myself using that as much as a warmer color. When I go from 0% to 1%, the light also just flickers a little bit sometimes. Honestly though, none of those are deal breakers to me. But until I found this. Can you guys hear it? Yeah, this light rattles like crazy. It almost seems like the internal unit is moving back and forth at least a few inches. I don't know, man. I don't think I've seen any of the other reviews saying this. So is this just my unit? I mean, I hope so. After this video, I'm definitely sending this back to Amazon for exchange and see if the replacement has this the same problem. But I mean, what the f for a $300 light? It should not be this, right? Before jumping into final conclusion though, I want to do some output comparison tests. Since I don't have a light meter, this would not be super objective, but just bear with me here. I'm using the same 640 base ISO on the S-Log 150th shutter speed, shooting in 24 frames per second, and the same picture profile and the same white balance. So we can also see the color variances between the lights. First up, this is a Quasar Science in 5600 at 100%. This is a Nanlite Pavotube at 5600 at 100%. Next up is the Digitalfoto Chameleon at 100% at 5600 Kelvin. To my eye, it seems in between the Pavotube and the Quasar. And also the exact same color grading. This is a Quasar Science at 5600 on the lowest output we can get on this dimmer. This is a Nanlite Pavotube at 5600 Kelvin at 1%. Lastly, this is the Chameleon at 1% setting. I don't think it's nearly as dim as either the Pavotube and the Quasar can go. And this is the Quasar Science at full blast at 3200. In 3200, 100% brightness on the Pavotube. Lastly, this is the Chameleon at 3200K at max output. I think this one tints quite a bit green compared to the last two. This is the Quasar Science at the lowest output on this dimmer at 3200. And this is the Pavotube at 3200 at 1%. This is the Chameleon at 1% setting. I don't think this is that dim at all. I'm only going to test the max output and RGB setting since that's the biggest weak point in many RGB lights. And this is a Nanlite Pavotube at full blast in the red color. This is a Chameleon at max output in color red. This is a Pavotube at 100% in blue color, 240 out of 360 on the color wheel. Compared to the Chameleon in color blue at max output. And this is the Pavotube at 100%, 120 out of 360 on the color wheel. And lastly, the Chameleon at max output in color green. So here's my summary of these three lights. For the Quasar Science Crossfade, you do get the biggest name brand, but you're losing out on a lot of the advanced features and control that these lights have. You're basically dealing with an interface that feels like it's built for 10 years ago. And also you need to spend money on extension cords and dimmers just to make it work. And if you're like me, who doesn't want to drop another $100 on a fancy dimmer, the dimming feature doesn't even work all the time, right? But when the Quasar does work, the results are beautiful. You have both the brightest output out of these bunch at 100%, and also when it dims down very nicely. It looks beautiful and smooth and very well diffused. Now moving on to these two, they're definitely very different animals as they're both RGB tubes. And also, they are both battery powered. That's another huge feature that I did not get to talk too much about. Basically, you can take them anywhere and pop them on the stand with the included plastic mount. That is super easy to get a horizontally wide source that is pretty large to light any interview subjects. I recently just shot a super run and gun news clip for someone with the Pavotubes. On this light stand, I just can grab on and move around with one hand. The Pavotube definitely has the best build quality, including the buttons, the dials. However, I just cannot get over the fact that you can visibly see the individual LEDs no matter you're in bicolor or RGB mode. And yes, it doesn't really show up on camera in most of its color and brightnesses, but it for sure limits the range of how low you can dim it down or how bright of an environment you can use this in, right? If you're using this in a super bright and maybe a setting with a lot of daylight, and when you expose for that scene, the light will look relatively dim and you will have a chance to be able to see individual LEDs in a tube. I just don't understand why there's such a rookie mistake in such a well-designed light. And lastly, the Chameleon, it's pretty much just slightly worse than the Nanlite in almost every way, but they do get the diffusion on the tubes right. And this is where it's super frustrating, right? The carrying case seems a little cheaper, the power brick seems a little cheaper, the metal cable just a little skinnier than the Nanlites. It doesn't feel like a premium light, but functionality-wise, it's pretty much the same. And actually, the Chameleon have a few more tricks up its sleeves. It has almost double the effects in the RGB mode. Also, strangely, the Chameleon is the only one that has an app. That's right, the Nanlite doesn't even have any wireless control for a $300 light. This app does look pretty janky, but I would definitely say the app makes a big difference in changing the effects and colors a lot easier, just a lot easier. Alright guys, here's what I would recommend after checking the footage. The one case where you should choose the Digitalfoto Chameleon is if you plan to primarily use it in the RGB mode as basically a specialty lighting. That is assuming the copy you got doesn't have the rattling problem that I have. Whether that's in music videos or creative photo shoots, as we saw in the comparison, there's almost no difference in terms of output and color in the RGB mode between this and the Nanlite. The fact that you don't have to worry about individual LEDs showing up in your frame, regardless of color and output, it's a big plus despite its worse build quality. On top of that, I think it's a big plus that the app allows you much easier control when switching the colors and effects. But in my case, I actually plan to spend way more time in the bicolor mode, so having great colors and results in that mode is by far more important to me. And the problem with the Chameleon is when I'm dimming down below 20%, like that, you just saw the tint change to considerably more green because I think it's actually using the RGB lights to help with the color temperature change. The case where I recommend the Nanlite Pavotubes is when you plan to use it in a lot of run and gun settings, where you need to move fast, be mobile, and adapt to any lighting environment and demands. Especially as a key light where you can just take it around and rig anywhere. When it's not used inside the frame, any negatives about this light disappears. I'll also vouch for the color consistency of the Nanlite, despite being very magenta in the color comparison I showed, but that is also because I'm benchmarking the white balance to the Quasar side. But if you benchmark the white balance to the Nanlite, the color is actually very consistent across different output levels. For me though, this might come as a surprise after I complained so much about the Quasar, but that's the one I'm actually planning to keep for now. I do have a music video shoot coming up where I would love to have the Chameleon for its RGB functions, but I will probably end up returning both the Chameleon and the Nanlite. The reason being, going back to my main use case, which is having the light mostly sitting indoors, just being in the background of the video and as a lamp. None of these two can fully surpass the results I get from the Quasar. If Nanlite comes out with the Pavotube Mark II that fixes the diffusion issue, I will buy it in a heartbeat. I see the Quasar holding value much better for its brand and time in the market already, as the market with newer RGB tubes can change overnight with new products coming out all the time. So I would suggest to wait if you cannot take full advantage of what these battery powered RGB light can offer today and get a lot of use out of them. If you're still watching, give me a like and subscribe, and I will see you in the next one. Thank you.